we can talk a little bit more details into nurses' narratives and storytelling. Um, so Dr. Susan Timpani is working in University of South Australia currently, as far as I know, and with her strong research background into storytelling, her master's research is about a narrative inquiry of storytelling. It's a learning strategy for nursing students to reflect on the interactions with the patients. And also her PhD project is about exploring the stories of international nursing students studying in South Australia during COVID-19 pandemic through the process of co-creating the Closed Borders podcast. So I think, Susan, you're one of the best persons and best resource person today for us to talk more details into storytelling. So starting with, would you like to talk a little bit about your research findings, and explaining a little bit about nurses' narrative? Thank you.
I could talk a little bit about the using narrative with nursing students, or it can be with nurses, as a way of just connecting with patients or just reflecting on practice. So there's that aspect. And then the other aspect, maybe just really briefly about the podcast, given that that's what Lynn has been talking a little bit about. So the podcast came about right at the very beginning in 2020. I was a clinical facilitator with international nursing students. Well, my group of students on placement all happened to be international, which is not unusual. And in those first few weeks, I started to see that their experiences of COVID was quite different than some of the local students. And that was because COVID was basically rampant in Asia. And so their fears and their stories that they were getting from home were quite alarming. But they would be telling me these stories and then would go back to the ward and just pick up where they left off. So they were kind of shutting them down, I guess. So that's when I decided to do a PhD and just explore this a little bit more. Let's just see if we can get some of the students, see if we can get people to sign up. And so we walked the journey through 2020 and 2021. So basically, as COVID was unfolding, I met with these students. So there was 9 students altogether, and we created a podcast of the actual journey. So yes, some of the findings were the students were feeling they had experienced racism. There was some problems with their visa, so they didn't have access to employment. So there was a lot of poverty. So there was a lot of things that were coming out of their stories. So all of that is up on their podcast, and that's now static. So the whole concept of a podcast is that it's frozen in time. So their experience was captured in 2020, 2021. It'll never happen again, and they won't forget. You can reflect back on a story, and your memory changes the way you perceive something. But on the podcast, that story was basically freezes that event in time. So that was the purpose of it. So that is basically that. So with my master's project, what I wanted to do was we often, with working with students, we talk about hands-on skills and we talk about therapeutic relationships, but we never talk about, well, how do you actually develop? What does it actually mean? What do you actually have to do? And one of the things that we did was when we got together as a group once a week, there's about 6 students at a time. I gave them a creative writing opportunity to do a creative writing exercise. So, first of all, I would give them a prompt and put the timer on for 10 minutes and say, don't think about it, don't overthink, just the prompt might be, what's something that happened today that gave you a strong emotion, and just write. And then after the 10 minutes was up, initially, often the story was very much like a case note entry the first time. And then if 1 or 2 people had been a bit brave, their entry was a lot more natural. And that then encouraged the others in the group next time when they came back. So it didn't take very long before there was a bit of I guess the peers realised how much more meaningful it was just to write in a more creative way. So what I thought I might do, if it's okay, I might just read a little bit out of what I came across. Is that okay? Yep. All right. So just to give you a little bit of a background, so this student, and the names are pseudonyms as well. So basically the background was the student was telling us that they had a patient admitted to coronary care, newly diagnosed with heart failure. The patient tells Chandra, the student, that she just wants to die. Chandra noticed that the patient was not eating or drinking. She coaxed her, but the patient told Chandra she had lost all hope of living and it was better that she died. And no matter what strategies Chandra tried, she knew they would not help. She wanted to express to the woman that she understood, but she knew that she could never feel what the woman felt. Chandra tells us she feels powerless, and she says that she wishes she could do something, but she can't. So the idea of the creative writing exercise that came out of that was not so much problem solving and coming up with any strategies. It was just getting the nursing student to get in touch with her own feelings. And the process of doing that, she would then come up with her own strategies of how to deal. So it wasn't me giving some of my own experience of the process of grief or whatever. It's just allowing that person to come. So basically, Chandra's opening statement established the sad theme of her story. She said, I saw one lady, but she had lost any hope of living. A few lines of context follows, and then she repeats the statement. This time she swaps over using the patient's words. She said, I have lost any hope of living. It's better if I die. Chandra changes points of view throughout the story, switching between her speaking self and experienced self can occur when re-encountering a difficult experience. So whenever Chandra describes the woman's strong emotions, she does so with the woman's own words or voice. And the woman's narration repeats the theme all through the story of lost hope. Chandra uses the woman's words again to express her feelings of lost dignity. Using the woman's own words helps Chandra separate which is the patient's story and which is hers. They are both managing difficult emotions. Chandra frequently stops the flow to address her listeners with comments about how she felt at the time, and her comments are often tinged with her own sense of helplessness. As Chandra shared her difficult experience, it was also important for her to describe what strategies she had tried. In narratives, the speaker usually tries to present themselves in the best light. So in one section, she repeated the dialogue describing herself coaxing the woman to eat and drink, the woman refusing and then complying. So when Chandra finishes describing what she did, she goes on to share with us the distress she feels. But I have never seen such a person. She doesn't have any hope. Such comments situated alongside the storyline are an indicator of Chandra's consciousness and mental processing. Telling the story is helping Chandra to reflect over her clinical practice. And as she concludes her story, Chandra says, I have never seen such a person. She doesn't have any hope. And so I've just got here, Chandra doesn't want any strategies. She'll process now that she's actually lived the event. She's had the opportunity to tell the story. As she's told the story, she's relived the event. So in a group or a podcast, listeners are prompted to reflect on their own moments, and the goal is to develop recognition of these moments. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Susan. Thank you really for sharing this quite strong stories with us, also giving us knowledge and information through this. When I was listening, just something that I was processing, correct me if I'm wrong. So even more than the clinical nursing, we can also sometimes use these narratives and podcasts as a way of processing our experiences and also for our emotional health and also as a learning journey throughout, as I guess, isn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, it was never meant to be a problem solving. I think we can use, and I think it's what Lynn was saying earlier, we're used to cognitive, we use different models of reflection, and it's very cognitive. This wasn't meant to be a model of reflection. It was just meant to be, let's see what happens. And as you get in touch with your own emotions and feelings, that's when the true growth happens. And that student will now go away and be able to sort it out for herself. She's learnt something. And that's something that you can't learn from a book. She learned it because she lived it and because she was able to tell the story. So there's a real power, I think, in storytelling.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you very much for sharing your wisdom of knowledge and experience with us, particularly about podcast and storytelling.